This is the fourth in a series of 6 Year 11 GCSE English Language videos. We've been reading the first chapter of Penelope Lively's Heatwave and have been introduced to Pauline, her daughter Teresa, son-in-law Maurice and grandson Luke. They have homes in adjoining houses entitled World's End within idyllic countryside. But the insides of the houses aren't what you would expect from the quaint exterior. We've learned that Maurice has a certain way about him and likes to appear knowledgeable, but self-deprecating with it. If you've completed the first 3 videos, you've done some great work so far, including writing using personification, experimenting with different past participles at the end of a sentence, and presenting a place in which appearance clashes with a more depressing reality. So, let's get on with it and carry on honing skills for GCSE English Language. You're watching Schofield on Shakespeare. Lively continues the first chapter of Heatwave by focusing on how Pauline sees Teresa's feelings for Maurice, and this triggers memories from her own past. Teresa is still in love with Maurice 3 years on. This is plain for all to see, for Pauline especially to see. She saw it just now, saw it as Teresa stood watching from Maurice's car, saw it in her stance, in the movements of her head, in the way her hand frets up and down the fence. And seeing this, she knew quite precisely what Teresa felt. Pauline could take her place for an instant, becoming not Teresa, but herself on another day, in another decade, waiting thus for a man. And here he comes, not driving a car up a dirt track, but walking quickly through the crowds at Victoria Station. She sees him coming from a long way off and does not go forward to meet him, but stays where she is, because these are the best moments of all, the thrilling jolt of recognition as she identifies him, an uprush of being as though all the senses were intensified. She will spit it out, this exquisite anticipation. And then he is yards away, is smiling, waving, and then he is holding her. She can feel him, smell him. Harry. There is nothing else like this, she knows. Nothing in the world. And as the moment comes gushing back to her today at World's End, it is the sensation that is sharpest, clearer by far than anything she sees. The station concourse, Harry's face. Harry himself is reduced to a prompt, the trigger for recovered emotion. Pauline reads another page of the manuscript she is editing. She makes a spelling correction, draws tactful attention to the repetition of a word. Then she shunts the manuscript to one side of her desk, yawns, stretches, and sits for a few moments, looking out at the end of this May afternoon. It has become warm, all of a sudden, after a chill grey spring. Summer is a distinct possibility. She has opened the window while she is working, almost for the first time. The window next door must be open also. She can hear Luke noises, a sequence of wordless urgencies, and Teresa's responses. She can hear Maurice, an indecipherable murmur. Maurice must be on the phone. Maurice is frequently on the phone. World's End is around 170 years old. Pauline is 55, Teresa is 29, Maurice is 44. What I like here is the skillful way Lively shifts from Pauline reflecting on Teresa's feelings for Maurice to her reliving her own past. The shift is begun in the final 2 sentences of the first paragraph on screen, with the suggestion of Pauline being able to take Teresa's place. Of course, this is not meant literally, but in terms of taking the place within Pauline's mind and train of thought. Rather than something more clunky and obvious, such as 20 years ago she experienced depressing these similar emotions within a new paragraph, there is the more seamless present participle becoming not Teresa but herself on another day. When it comes to the second paragraph, in which she relives her own past experience of love, ironically, Lively shifts from the past tense to use the present. The effect of the present tense is to emphasize the immediacy of Pauline's recollections. She is reliving these memories right now, and they are literally happening within her mind as she speculates about the similarity of her past feelings and those currently being experienced by her daughter. So, your first task. Describe a moment which triggers a past memory, but aim to introduce this past memory relatively seamlessly, avoiding clunky and obvious pointers. But be careful. Make sure that your writing makes clear sense, that it is clear exactly what you are referring to. Off you go. Press pause. The video will resume in 5 seconds' time. I wrote, "The boy is smiling, or at least one side of his mouth is curled upwards. He talks breezily about his weekend back home, the cannelloni at Zizi's, the hours of freedom to relax, the mock play fights with the irritating, yet somehow lovable, younger brother. Too breezily. Looking around the table, the terrifying isolation of this superficially content young man is palpable. And in an instant he becomes a younger self from 34 years previously, another teenager desperate to fit in, but left to endure in spite of excruciating attempts to ingratiate." How do I attempt to make this piece of writing interesting? Well, we have the link made between the boy and the narrator, and the seamless way this is introduced. This conversation has led the older man to see his past self again via his sense of the boy's current position and feelings. Note also the hints about possible unhappiness within the first paragraph. We are not told explicitly, but we wonder about the additional clarification given about the smile, as well as the adverb breezily. These introduce a degree of doubt in the reader's mind about whether this boy is quite as idyllically happy as he is trying to make out. This doubt is confirmed starkly through the dramatic short paragraph and short sentence for effect, too breezily. I always recommend to my pupils that they use one of these one-sentence paragraphs for effect within their GCSE pieces. It helps meet criteria such as, for OCR, the form is deliberately adapted to position the reader, showing a sophisticated control of purpose and effect, or for CIE, structure is secure, well-balanced and carefully managed for deliberate effect, and the other exam boards have very similar criteria. Note also the use of very specific detail. Not just a meal with his family, but cannelloni at Zizi's. As well as the more complex vocabulary in words such as palpable, excruciating, which is correctly spelt, and ingratiate, essentially to suck up. And so, on the subject of vocabulary, I'd like you to produce a table now, similar to the one you produced in the first task of Lockdown Lesson 3, but focusing on verbs rather than adjectives. Whereas adjectives are describing words, verbs are words which typically describe actions, but also conditions and experiences. Press pause to copy this out now, making sure that you leave sufficient space in your table to fit in full definitions and full clauses from the text which contain the word. Now look again at how the words are used within the context and include the full clauses within the example column of your table. You'll have a pretty good idea of what the words mean, but check how precise your understanding is by using a dictionary and copying out the definition. Press pause to complete your table. It's interesting how frets is used here, isn't it? Her hand is fretting up and down the fence, clearly suggests a movement, whereas we would typically expect the verb fret to be about worried feelings rather than movements. Thus, within the context, it would appear as though Lively's interpretation of the verb would actually be acting or moving in a way which indicates worry and unhappiness. The best writers will, very occasionally, play with language and have the confidence to use words in slightly different, unusual contexts. But of course, to be able to do this and pull it off, you need to be a vociferous reader yourself. To take Lively, for instance, talking about her house in Islington to Bell Mooney for BBC Radio.
To me, this house is entirely overthinged. It's crammed with, I think there are 3,000 books sort of scattered around up and down. And actually, they're the part of this house that matters to me very much.
You know, the government...
Next up is gushing, often used for water or for people showering praise about someone. Here it suggests the speed in which the memory comes back to Pauline. Finally, shunts, within this context indicating a dismissive, decisive movement. Something Lively does well here is describing the anticipation Pauline felt when recalling waiting for her husband Harry at Victoria Station in London. This reminds me of another passage from another book in which someone is eagerly anticipating a loved one's arrival at a train station in New York. It's very different in feel, this passage. Taken from another one of my favourite female writers, Edith Wharton, and her novel The Age of Innocence. I'll quickly read it for you. The clanging and groaning of the train came nearer, and it staggered slowly into the station like a prey-laden monster into its lair. Archer pushed forward, elbowing through the crowd and staring blindly into window after window of the high-hung carriages. And then suddenly he saw Madame Olenska's pale and surprised face close at hands, and had again the mortified sensation of having forgotten what she looked like. They reached each other, their hands met, and he drew her arm through his. "This way, I have the carriage," he said. Note how the negative personification of the train and the melodramatic simile foreshadow Archer's own disappointments at seeing Madame Olenska, in spite of his previous feelings of extraordinary excitement. But, back with Lively, there is no such disappointment, at least within Pauline's memory. So, have a go at writing a paragraph in which you describe your anticipation, excitement about something which is about to happen. You choose what that is, get writing, and press pause. I wrote, 20 minutes to go, and at last relaxation smacks its lips against my body, leaving me in a curious state of sensual excitement. I picture the scene, the shimmy, swerve, gallivanting blast of rocket-fueled pace. I picture the ball rising in slow motion, its inevitable ascent into the roof of the net. Snapping open the tab from the royal blue can of the Belgian gods, I settle back, breathe, and dream. 2 hours later, the darkness of the habitual 0-0. I whimper. As regular viewers of my channel may have figured out, I'm indeed talking about the experience of getting excited about watching a Crystal Palace match before enduring some really depressing drivel. Indeed, this is timely, as only last night I sat through a truly dire 1-0 defeat to Wolves in the FA Cup, a real waste of an evening. But how do I attempt to make this piece of writing interesting? Well, I like the idea of plenty of build-up. Seen here in the use of anaphora within I picture, as I speculate about those moments of brilliance to come within the game. Note also some unusual personification. Perhaps I've had a hard day at work and my body feels all tense. Thus it's great when relaxation gives me a smacker, leaving me in a curious state of sensual excitement. But generally, I always prefer it when build-up results in an anti-climax rather than a climax. After all, writing does need to be like real life, and as human beings, we're always more interested in bad news to others than good.
On that cynical note, that's it for Lesson 4, in which we've done some work on seamlessly triggering past memories, developed a more precise understanding of verbs, and looked at building up to an anti-climax. I hope it's been helpful and enjoyable. Many thanks for watching.